It's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into some of the key issues in the spotlight right now. The Yoon administration announced its economic policy last Thursday in a bid to overcome the heightened economic uncertainty. The new policy direction also comes as the Korean economy faces a risk of stagflation and a mix of slowing growth and high inflation.
The new roadmap centres on deregulation and tax cuts in an effort to prop up private sector-led growth. And to get an expert's analysis on the changes ahead, we connect with Yang Jun-sok, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Very good morning to you, Professor.
Good morning.
Well, first off, among the many policy changes that we've seen, which one stood out the most for you, Professor?
Okay, well, the plan itself encompasses a wide array of policies, some of which are very detailed and some of which are not really worked out. So they are saying that they'll have some more concrete plans for those policies in a few weeks or a few months. It has four major pillars. First, regulatory reform and private investment inducements, job creation policies, SME policies. The second pillar is various reforms, public sector reforms, pension reforms, labor market reforms, education reforms, financial sector and service sector reforms. The third pillar is basically R&D and industrial policy, trying to set up a strategic industries for Korea and have carbon neutral policies in place. The fourth pillar is the social safety net and more incentive to work, improvements in the welfare system. And the fifth pillar is the short-term problems dealing with the high inflation and economic security, supply chain security. Now, what I like about the emphasis of these plans overall is that they're much more market-based, civilian sector-led than the previous administration. The regulatory reform is taking the center stage, not only for the first pillar, but for other pillars as well. So I do like that aspect of it. But again, this is a very wide-ranging plan. It encompasses virtually all areas of micro, macro, and industrial policies. So it's really very difficult to rate this plan on a single grade, but most of the policies are medium-term and long-term based. It has to do with changing the fundamentals, which Korean economy does need. But it also means that because of that, we may not see any results in the short run. And because the high inflation and worries about the supply chain that is short-term based, people may be disappointed, at least in the beginning, that we are not going to see that much results in the short run.
Like you said, I mean, it really just covers a whole range of different fields here. But I want to kind of go into certain topics, specifically the Yoon government, of course, cutting corporate taxes to encourage companies to expand investment. What it did was it lowered the maximum rate to 22% from 25%, which is quite interesting because the previous Moon administration, right, raised it from 22 to 25 back in 2017. But I guess the big question is, I mean, is the tax cut enough to make any kind of significant improvements?
Well, what we see in other countries which make corporate tax cuts is that it may work out in the longer term, but in the short term, we may not see that much of a change. Now, cutting the top corporate tax rate has been a request from the business sector for a long time, but there has been some criticism that rather than just cut the top rates, they should have cut rates for everybody so all businesses can take advantage of the corporate tax cuts. But when we see, say, corporate tax cuts that took place in the United States a few years ago, we see that it doesn't necessarily increase investment or increase jobs in the short run. In order to do so, companies really need to be confident that they are going to make profits when they make investments or increase the number of jobs. So it sets up the stage for possible investment increases and job job creation, but it does not necessarily make it happen unless the demand cooperates as well. So we may not see the effect of the tax cut until we have an upward swing in demand, and I'm sorry to say that that's not going to happen in the near future.
And Professor, well, to revitalise the corporate sector, the Yoon administration, its policy direction, it's all about cutting red tape. And what kind of regulatory measures were in place that were really hindering innovation and growth in the first place? And what are your thoughts on the Yoon administration's focus on the corporate sector?
Okay, during the presidential campaign, the regulations that candidate Yoon had mentioned during his campaign was the 52-hour workweek rule. Now, even though you're supposed to work 52 hours per week, there is some leeway. You can work more than 52 hours if you have average of 52-hour work week over 3 months. But business sector have been saying that 3 months is much too short a period to average out the work week because, well, a lot of businesses work on annual cycles rather than 3-month cycles. So that's one regulation that President Yoon has promised to change. Other ones are zoning regulations and land, because a lot of large companies have problems building factories because of these regulations. And then there's the LTV, the loan to value, and DTI, debt to income regulations, which keep young people from buying houses. President Yoon has promised to loosen those regulations as well. But it's not just these particular regulations that the business sector is complaining about. Korea is known as having one of the toughest regulatory environments in the world, very burdensome. So the government wants to get rid of a lot of regulations that businesses find very burdensome, and they did. It is forming the centerpiece of the current economic plans. It's listed as the first policy that they're going to implement, and it's setting up task force composed of the Vice Minister for Economic Affairs, as well Vice Minister of Economic Affairs, as well as various ministers for economic ministries, and they're going to have regular meetings with representatives from the corporate sector to see which regulations that they can get rid of. Now, this is, I think, a very hopeful sign that this government will get rid of burdensome regulations, unnecessary regulations. But also, governments have tried this before, and they have not made it work because they lacked political will. They lacked some skills to determine which regulations should be eliminated. And because of problems with various interest groups who have interests that they on some of these regulations that they do not want to get rid of. So there is going to be a lot of problems trying to reform these regulations. We'll have to see whether the Yoon government has the will strong enough to get beyond these interest groups and try to streamline regulatory structure in the Korean economy.
We'll also have to see whether or not 5 years is enough to cover all those different, issues to resolve here. Professor, unfortunately, this is all the time that we have. But again, thank you very much for your insights, and looking forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you.